think that the world is about to dramatically change.
Can your device read minds?
Minds, not necessarily. What it can read is interpret your intent.
Ramses is a neuroscientist and founder of Neurable, which is pioneering brain-computer interfaces that let us control technology with our minds.
The timeline that we have before we have to worry about it is pretty far away.
How far are we talking?
There's just so many problems still with invasive tech, right?
What happens if bad actors get in the way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scary shit, but I feel like
the future looks amazing, but also a little scary. If you, just like me, want to have an honest outlook of what the next chapter could look like and how best to prepare for that, I ask for one simple favor: subscribe, so I can invite the brightest minds on this podcast and get those answers for both you and I. Enjoy the episode. Ramses, why should someone listen to this episode?
I think that the world is about to dramatically change. You know, we saw the world change significantly when ChatGPT came out, and it's been, and this is just the beginning of something, of ChatGPT. Now we're about to see the world change because of neurotechnology. And I think that the reason worth listening is to get a grasp of the rapid momentum that's about to occur and how you can stay on top of it and benefit from it.
I can't wait to get deep into this. Such an interesting topic. Why are you best placed to serve this space, the brain-computer interface, neurotechnology space? And was there a moment in your childhood, in your teenagehood, that prepared you for this vision?
That's a really hard question to answer and multifaceted. I guess from a personal, perspective, I would say the reason that I'm well placed is because this is a very personal journey for me, right? I had a tragic accident happen when I was in elementary school. My uncle lost his legs, and I essentially wanted to build prosthetics for him in order to help him be a part of the world. And so, why am I the best place? Because this is my life's journey. Like, I feel like this is my purpose for existence, right? From a more, I guess, technological perspective, it's because the team that I work with, which are such amazing people, have poured their hearts out to solve some of the biggest problems in neurotechnology and have been successful. Mm. And we've seen that with the introduction of, I guess, these headphones that I have around my neck that record, brain activity through these sensors right here. Yeah. Where it was the first time a brain-computer interface was tested against what a consumer would expect from a product, and it was successful. And that really opens up the floodgates for this technology to really scale out and grow.
To someone who's just listening and thinking, like, what the hell is happening? Or I have never heard of anything that affects the brain. Take us back. Like, where are we with brain-computer interface? Actually define what BCI is as well.
Yeah, BCI really is just a fancy way of saying how can you interface the brain with some sort of computer, right? And typically there were these large gel cap systems with sensors everywhere, and that's really what most people, that have seen a BCI would think of. I think nowadays most people think about like Black Mirror or something on a TV show. Where I think that they show a lot of the scary parts of a BCI, but BCIs can be so powerfully transformative, right? They can, for example, help people with ALS communicate to caregivers and loved ones. They can track neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. They can even be used to diagnose, neurodiverse conditions. So there's just so many things that they can do. But most of the introduction to BCIs has been a lot scarier than as soon as I tell somebody about it, 90% of the time they're like, oh, is that like X? And I'm like, no, not like that at all. There's like a lot of good that can be done with it too.
There was a recent episode, it was called Bête Noire. It was the Black Mirror episode where a woman was basically controlling someone else through. Wow. And I don't think it was actually BCI, but it was the amazing thing that Charlie Brooker and Black Mirror have been able to do is to visualize what a future could look like. Unfortunately, it is dystopian and not utopian. But why is this now the right moment for BCI? And neurotechnology? Like, why has it taken this long for us to even start scratching the surface of this space?
I think that it's the same reason why a lot of technology has taken a while, right? For example, VR is not a new technology. It's been around since, even I remember seeing first VR stuff that was supposed to go consumer in the early 90s, right? And I'm sure in research labs way earlier. My friend Tom Furness, for example, worked on VR systems as part of his grad school work, right? But the main thing is that there has to be a convergence that happens where all the right elements are in effect. And I think that there's this great article by Guger, and I can send it to you afterwards as well, where he says he calls it the Anacarena effect, where everything has to be good enough. And right now we have the right type of sensors. They can fit inside everyday products, like these are made out of cloth, right? We have the right software, so AI has been able to boost the signal to noise of EEG, which is the types of brain-computer interfaces that we're working with to make it usable. We have the right type of hardware, headphones. The chipsets have gone smaller. You can now process neuromorphic data on these devices. There's all these, battery life is long enough, right? Like all these things have converged to finally create that moment where you can create a system that feels like a product and not a science project. And as soon as you can do that, that's when you can really start to get value from it at scale instead of just within a research setting.
Very interesting. And what are you guys doing at Neurable? I know it's been like, a 10-year journey and probably evolved so much, but yeah, explain to us, like, what is Neurable doing right now, and like what problem areas are you trying to solve for at the moment?
Yeah, really what we focus on at Neurable is signal processing. We use AI to boost the signal to noise of brain data. Now, that's just cool technology, right? What matters is how do you take cool technology and advancements and turn it into something that can actually add value to people. And so what we've done is we've partnered with companies like Master Dynamic, which is the headphone maker, in order to essentially bring brain-computer interfaces at scale to individuals. And one of the key things that has prevented, I believe, neuroscience from really taking off as significantly in understanding the brain is that we don't have a way of measuring the brain that's scalable, real time, and longitudinal, right? And if we don't understand, the brain's a highly dynamic system. If we don't understand it as a person is growing and evolving at millions of people and have the ability to do it in real time when things happen, it's like we're looking at the brain only in the snapshots whenever we go to a lab. And so that's really the mission of what Neurable is doing. But then in order to accomplish that, we have to make it something that consumers will actually buy.
Why do you think a consumer today might purchase and just to explain, like, this is a form factor, a type of way that your chips can basically fit into the everyday life of a consumer, right? Instead of it being planted on their head or like a random band, it's something that they're going to be wearing, right? What value would they get today from buying, let's say, those headphones rather than just some AirPods?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really the secret isn't in the chips. We just use the existing Qualcomm chips or ARM Cortex chips that come with these devices, but it's the software that we write that increases the signal to noise of the brain data. And what that means is that normally brain data is so noisy that the signal gets drowned out by the noise. And so if we're able to increase the signal and decrease the noise, we're able to really understand the signal of the brain. And why would you buy this product? There's been two killer value propositions that have come out that have really, connected with customers. The first one is with individuals who have attentional issues. Right now, there's this epidemic when it comes to burnout, when it comes to really understanding how to have healthy mental hygiene habits. And so the app on the App Store enables you to essentially measure your brain data in real time. It'll tell you when to take a break. And what's really powerful is that your brain has no pain receptors. So when you feel tired, that's your body that's tired. Your brain's been tired for hours beforehand. But if you can take a break at the right time for your brain, it actually boosts your performance, right? The second value proposition is more on the brain health side. So for the first time, we now have a product that you can wear every day to take calls, watch movies. They're also just a great pair of headphones too, right? But then during the time that you're wearing them, similar to like your Whoop or your Oura Ring, you're capturing all this brain data that can then be used to track your health. And right now, we track our health with devices like Whoop and Oura Ring, but the brain is the most powerful organ with the most significant amount of things that can affect it. And now we have a tool to be able to track that in a daily way.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I've got my Whoop on and it's really changed like a lot of my habits, right? I used to drink quite a bit of alcohol, let's say 3-4 times a week at times. And I've pretty much quit alcohol because I've seen like the impact that it's had on my sleep and other parts of my life. What have been the biggest changes people have made from wearing the headphones?
So many. It's from something as simple as coffee, right? We had an individual, for example, who drank coffee twice a day. And then what ended up happening was that they forgot to take coffee in the morning. And what's interesting is that when they would take coffee in the morning, they'd have a ton of energy in the morning. And then even if they drink coffee in the afternoon, they would still be burnt out. And so when they skipped in the morning, it turns out that they not only were focused in the morning, but then in the afternoon, they were able to get a second boost of focus. But the bigger implication here is that they were able to cut their caffeine in half, sleep better, and on top of that, essentially they were overburning themselves out in the morning, right? There's other individuals who, for example, and this isn't available yet, but this is why they're buying it. You can track your data and run tons of experiments with it just to see how your brain works. And so we have individuals, for example, that have epilepsy, right? And what they'll look at is they'll look at their data and they'll say like, oh, is this a weird response than what I'm used to? Should I be more aware that I should be, that something might be happening in the near future, right? And one thing we want to do on the longevity side is auto detect those things so that essentially we give you like a check engine light for your brain. But I mean, there's just so many examples.
Have you ever worried on your journey, because I know you started in 2016, that you were too early into this space? Because I know the technology now is like rapidly changing, but it feels like the brain, the most complex known thing in the universe, right? It just feels like we're just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah, and you know what? You're not necessarily wrong. I remember I was at the Rice Business Plan competition. It's like the most prestigious business plan competition in the world, but that's where we got our first lead investor. And I remember he came up to me and he's like, Ramses, you are 2 to 3 years too early, just to be honest with you. He's like, but if you're able to get through this, you're going to be significantly ahead company-wise. So I'm willing to back you, but it's going to be so much more painful than you can possibly imagine because you're early, right? And he's like, and I'm willing to take that bet on you, but I want to make sure that you're willing to understand what you're getting yourself into. And I think at that time, I was hyped up on energy, and I said yes. I still believe that it was the right move, but had I known how painful it would have been, I definitely would have thought a little bit more about it.
Gone traveling for a few years and then, no, that's awesome. I think the reason why this episode is so timely is that, again, we are at the beginning of what is possibly going to be a very exciting thing. But also, there's a lot of, it's fraught with danger as well. I think that's important. We will definitely get onto that. So, actually, I just wanted to quote Peter Diamandis because he was on the podcast for a second time a few weeks ago, and he was talking about how optimists live for 15% longer than those that are not as positive, right? And so I just want to go a bit deeper into your timeline of how you see the Neurable device and the value kind of evolving, because right now, okay, it's very much telling people X, Y, and Z, but the abundance of possibility in this space is crazy and scary as well. So just walk us through your timeline and also how it can help people live longer as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And what I would say is, like, at least from my timeline, we're moving a lot faster than I thought we were going to. We created this vision video like 3 or 4 years ago, and I thought a lot of the stuff on that video was going to be like decades away, and just seeing what the team has been able to do, I feel like it's like 2 to 5 years away. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy, right? And it's more about like how do we make sure we create enough momentum that other people can hop on board, right? You're asking like how can it help your health? How can it help you live longer? Well, now we have EEG, these sensors on these devices that record your brain activity that have been used in laboratory settings for tracking things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. The main issue is that you have to go into a lab at least once a week for like 5 to 10 minutes, get checked, and then you can compare this year versus last year, right? But when you now have it in headphones, earbuds, in a device that you're already going to wear every day, well, then, we can already do that tracking. The main difference is that like as us as the company, we can't solve every problem, right? And so we have this developer kit, this system for people to get involved with. And it's more of like, how do we empower the world with it? How do we communicate it? Because, less than 1% of people in this planet probably know what a brain-computer interface is, right? And I remember in the like 2016 timeframe, they actually did a survey of how many people know what VR was, and it was less than 1%. We're at that point right now with BCI. So less than 1% of people know that it's possible at scale. And now it's how do we communicate that outwards? How do we get more scientists involved, more people doing research and understanding themselves in order to really create the data sets and the capabilities that we need to really hit that future that's in front of us.
Can your device read minds?
Minds, not necessarily. What it can read is electrical activity from your brain. And from that electrical activity, what we can do is interpret your intent. It's always going to be high level, like I can't necessarily say like no one's going to be able to tell your social security number. That's just not going to happen with at least the type of technology we're working with. But people can tell, for example, that you're feeling tired or that you're unfocused, or, you can pick up some data to maybe do specific commands to control devices. It's very high level, but you don't have to get to that level of precision to be able to pull out mind reading in order to add real value to people.
I don't know if you've heard about this. I think it's an AI model. It's an LLM that can, through Wi-Fi noise, has been able to basically map out where someone is in a house at any given time. And so, like, how far are we away from BCI? Because I think so much of what we want to talk about is where we're going, right? It's like, and to get into that crystal ball that I always ask. But how far are we away from being able to read people's minds?
I mean, I think that we have the technology to do it. Like Neuralink can essentially do something like that, right? We have MRIs that can, if you imagine an image, we can reproduce it to a certain extent. We have the tools to do it. The main thing is like, when is it going to be ready for at scale use? And brain computer interfaces have been around since the early 80s. And it's only now that we're actually seeing them be able to be scalable. So, in order to not like, sometimes I think we as futurists might tend to be afraid of like the progress that could happen and like where this technology can go. And, personally, mind reading, do I want mind reading? Maybe not, do I want fully sentient AI? Maybe not. But what I would say is that AI doesn't need to become conscious to become valuable, right? And I think that the timeline that we have before we have to worry about it is pretty far away.
Okay. How far are we talking?
I mean, non-invasively, it's not even in the foreseeable future, right? Invasively, what I would say is that it's probably going to be in the next 70 years. And
okay,
so
okay.
Yeah, like people think that like Neuralink is going to come out next year and like, be able to go at scale. There's just so many problems still with invasive tech, right? Like a lot of their animals passed away last year because of surgeries. You have to get these chips replaced in your brain every few years because of scar tissue buildup. There's just so many problems across multiple domains, let alone, Neuralink is focusing on one kind of key area, but there's like which is the implantable side, and I guess they're kind of focusing on the signal processing side to a certain extent.
And signal processing, for those that don't know, is
Taking the
including
brain,
myself, I should say. I'm saying as if I know it, but
it's taking the signal from the brain and then processing it to create data in response to it. So whenever you see those videos of the monkeys playing with the little like ping pong game in their videos, they use signal processing and machine learning to do that. And that type of work has been done before. You know, there's this company called BlackRock Neurotech that did that quite a long time ago, right? But what I'm trying to say is there's just within that entire you see a company doing this powerful thing, but really what they're doing is they're taking one vertical slice of the problem and they're trying to solve it. But there's so many vertical slices to the issue. Even just how do we make it biocompatible enough that, you know, it injects well into the brain, doesn't create scar tissue, but then also doesn't need to be replaced, right? Like all these things need to happen across domains that they're not even touching on. And so if each one of those, let's say, takes 10 years, there's still like 30 or 40 innovations needed to be done before we get there.
Would you say you're conservative in saying 70 years? Because we all know that AI, AGI, singularity, biosingularity, these things are going to happen in the next max 2 decades, right?
Maybe. I guess maybe I'm just overly conservative is what I would say, right? Like, I think that, let's see, for example, I would love for AGI to happen in the next 2 decades. I think that we fundamentally need to create a system that, a new way, a new step in AI. Just like, for example, classical machine learning, as soon as neural networks came out again, I guess they were reintroduced into the world. They changed the paradigm, and now LLMs are changing the paradigm. I think we need probably 1 or 2 more paradigm shifts. If I'm right, maybe we need more, right? Before we get to the place that we can get to AGI. That's my personal opinion. I think but I don't think we need to get to AGI once again to drive value. Like AlphaFold, which is the AI that they have for understanding the folding of proteins, huge value that's already going to be created. And so I think within these specific niches, I think it's going to happen. And I hope I'm wrong, by the way. Like, I hope I can look back and be like, man, you were so naive, you know, but at least that's my opinion. You know, I think that science moves a little bit slower than people think. Anything that's 10 years away is farther away. Anything that you think is within the next 5 years is like within the next 2 years. I think we get the short and the long prediction wrong. That's kind of like my opinion, but you know.
So interesting. So just want to dive a bit deeper into that because Neuralink is an example. They are focusing on individuals that are disabled, right? Or quadriplegic, what's the right word for it? And then yourselves, you're going after specific use cases. So army, special needs, kids with autism or ADHD. So do you feel this whole BCI space is really catered to a niche? Or do you think there's going to actually be a use case that becomes more mainstream?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like a early days of the computer, right? When the computer first came out, it was very much for niche use cases. It was for individuals, essentially. At first, it was just people in a garage messing around with tech, which is cool, right? Then it became essentially a tool for somebody to do Excel. Like it was called VisiCalc. But then over time, more people built on top of those tools. New ideas became developed, like, for example, the internet. And now we see computers used in everything. And so that's kind of how I see it with BCI too. We're going to start with this kind of niche use case. And our goal is like, how do we create that infrastructure to empower those people who want to build in those niche use cases? But then over time, I mean, and I think you believe this too, neurotechnology is so broad. It's so powerful. Everything it's essentially the next software, right? Just like software is used everywhere, neurotech is going to be used everywhere. It's just a matter of time and making sure that we can find the areas where there's so much value that enables the rest of the world to develop around it.
Yeah, you recently said on the podcast that AI and BCI are going to be the greatest gifts to humanity.
Yeah.
I really want to delve into your crystal ball right now. Because I think, first of all, we need to put timelines. You're saying 70 years, it could be much sooner. I think there's going to be a bit of a Cambrian explosion, especially with BCI in the next 5 to 10 years. And you're saying it's going to be as abundant as software.
Yeah.
So
I think non-invasive is going to be significantly abundant, and it's going to be everywhere, right? I think invasive is going to take a lot longer than people think.
okay.
I guess that's the clarifying
Gotcha.
point. Yeah.
Okay. So in 2030, with non-invasive neurotech, so that might be sunglasses with said EEG
Yeah.
sensors, headphones, plus some other stuff, right? What can we expect to see?
Yeah. That is like the dream world that I can't wait to see happen. And it just has to do with the speed of adoption.
Okay.
Because the technology and the performance levels are there for the majority of the use cases and are going to get there for so many more. But I can imagine a future where you're wearing AR glasses. Those AR glasses have brain sensors and eye trackers. That's your new mouse and keyboard. When you enter any room or situation, and we already have partnerships like this, it's going to be able to understand your brain, and there's going to be a whole layer of effective computing that comes in. Like we're working with a group called MeSpace, for example. They make these pods for office workers where you can walk in and take a call. Well, very soon they're going to be able to understand your current mental state. And if you're about to get in a meeting, they'll turn the lights and play some audio to help you get into that right mentality. And if you're just going into these pods, and this is why they call them pods and not phone booths. If you go into these pods and you just need to take some time to relax and like decompress because it's been a really stressful day, they'll notice that, the lights will dim, certain actions are going to happen. But the thing is, the brain is unique for every person. So it's going to be able to be customized based off of the individual, right? There's going to be a future where authentication and security is going to be not something we take for granted, right? Because we're going to be wearing these AR glasses, and we're just going to, for example, checking into a hotel is going to be such a different experience. You're just going to walk in, and your AR glasses will know exactly which room you need to go into. You don't have to tell the staff, here's my ID, like take XYZ. It's just going to be authenticated organically in the background as soon as you walk in. Go into your room, then it's going to be, like I said, your room is going to be customized for you. It's going to be a seamless world. And that's what I mean by AI and the brain are going to be the greatest gifts to humanity. That and another perspective, which I'm happy to share as well, but it's basically that we're finally going to be able to create a world that's fully seamless, but most powerfully is that everyone can take advantage of it. The idea of somebody being differently abled will stop being something where we feel like we have to change the world to, there's this whole concept where we have to essentially adapt the world in order to make it seamless. And I'm all for that, by the way. I love that. And I think we should be inclusive. But what if inclusiveness was just the norm because it was the easiest way for everybody to interact with the world, right? That's, I think, the holy grail, the mecca of of what BCIs can do for everyone.
I want to hear your perspective. You said you wanted to add something in, but I feel like we have a lot of pretty spiritual people on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel at a high level, everyone just wants to feel understood.
Yeah.
And so with a lot of these devices, and I've seen the brain scans on kids with ADHD, you showed me them before we started, but it's stark. And as someone who's faced their fair share of challenges like growing up, I think often I just wanted to feel understood.
For sure.
And so to have that data and to say, yo, my brain scan, because I'm wearing these headphones, whether they're Neurable or not, is showing my teacher or my mother that this is happening, and please alert me because of X, Y, and Z. On the flip side, though, I'm sure there are people listening thinking, oh my fucking God, this is scary shit. Like, what happens if bad actors get in the way? And instead of changing the mood lighting, they know exactly how to do something that is going to create the brain scans to go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scary shit, AI is scary, right? Nukes are scary. There's so many things that we've been able to conquer as human beings that we thought were scary. And I think that, and this is maybe me just being a rational optimist about the world. I think that we have the know-how and responsibility to be able to do it in a way where we're going to be able to reap the benefits without, creating the pain that can come with it. And the best way that I see it is, like I said, nukes. We handled that, right? That was pretty incredible technology that was really, really, scary. Look at wearable devices. And theoretically, you can capture a person's productivity and other pieces of information through those devices, but they're very much designed to be for the user to be empowered versus for somebody to monitor you. And at least from our perspective, my co-founder is a neuroethicist, right? Our perspective is to continue down that vision of how do we use it as a tool for self-empowerment than for somebody to essentially create input into another person, right? And at least with non-invasive technology, right, you can just take it off. There's always a way to remove that power, right? Whether it's from yourself or from somebody else. And that, I think, is really valuable.
Yeah.
And so at least I'm less worried about it, just from the perspective that I think we as humanity, from the very beginning when we invented fire and created spears, all the way till the modern technology that we have now, if we can handle all of that, I feel like we've demonstrated that we have the capability to potentially handle more.
So you're mentioning apart from AI and BCI, another paradigm shift that you think that you're very excited about. Did you want to just quickly share about that?
Yeah. When going back to essentially saying, AI and BCI are going to be the biggest gifts to humanity, it actually goes down to the description that you were talking about, which is AGI, that we're going to get there in the next 20 years. I think that what we've learned is that the more we learn about the brain, the better we make AI. And the more we learn about AI and develop it, the more we learn about the brain. And so I think that there's going to be one more paradigm shift that we need to actually get to AGI. And I think that that's what we will discover as we learn more about the brain. And that's going to be, that's where I think the biggest inflection points are going to be, right? That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. Because when I think about the brain, I'm thinking about, really it's just data. We're taking patterns, data, and at the moment, we probably can't process or begin to process the amount of data that the brain holds. So with AGI, it's going to happen pretty seamlessly, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, I think that AGI... Well, I'm going to go back on one thing real quick. I think that computers right now are really good at computing, which is doing a process that is mathematical and getting it done. And I think that AGI will be very good at doing that. And then I think that once we add biology into the mix, which is why I think neuroscience, BCI and AI together will be so powerful. Once we add a little bit more of that biology in the mix, it'll be good at what humans are good at doing, which is just more there's this concept in science called temperature, where the more temperature you add, the more you allow errors to happen. And we kind of see that right now with LLMs, where we call them hallucinations. But these hallucinations could also be thought of as creative thought. And I think that that's the part of the human brain that we haven't necessarily leveraged as much from the compute side. And so together, I think that they're going to really unleash this larger capability when we work with computers instead of separated from computers. That's where I think that melding is going to be the future of everything.
I'm still concerned that, let's say, said Secret Service agency, they detain someone and they can tell straight away the truth. Is that simply just an evolution from those truth tests or lie detector tests?
At least right now with a brain computer interface, we can't get to that level of information. And will we be able to get there eventually? Yeah. I mean, the brain is that, is that capable, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that look at the laws that we've put in place to make sure that people are protected. They can't just force you to take a polygraph. And that's the closest thing that we have right now to something like that. So I think that, and maybe there's going to be situations like, for example, as terrible as this was, like Guantanamo Bay, right, where somebody won't have a choice, right? Whether BCI is there or not isn't going to change the fact that like people are going to make those choices, right? But for 99% of individuals, I think that we're going to do the right thing and protect the rights. You know, a nuclear bomb was still used. 2 of them were used. Think about that, right? So the possibility of that happening is always going to be there, but the probability of it happening is going to be so small or so tiny that I think we're going to be able to demonstrate that we as humans can be responsible with this technology.
Yeah, you hit on such a good point, which is technology. And it's so good that you have an ethicist actually on your team, like thinking about these things, because I spoke to the former Deputy Secretary of Commerce and also the Undersecretary of NIST, right, National Institute of, and I spoke to Undersecretary Locasio, former Undersecretary Locasio, about this. And we were talking about AI standards and ethics. And it feels like technology, and this is me quoting Peter again, technology always moves much faster than society does. And he says in his tweet on this that the collective wisdom is needed, right? How do we prepare for a world where non-invasive and eventually invasive BCI becomes the norm and we develop abilities or superpowers that we currently don't have? Like, how do we prepare people for the good and the bad?
Man, that's a great question.
I try.
I just, and maybe this is me being naive. I have hope for humanity from the perspective that, like I said, we've demonstrated in history that we can handle these kinds of things, right? For example, we have cars. Cars are dangerous. People can drive them around. You know, we have accidents that happen, but people can be truly malicious with a car. You can run through a crowd of people, for example. There is nothing stopping us from using the technology that we have right now to cause already a ton of, damage, right? And especially when you think about like terrorist attacks, right? Like all these things can and do happen. You know, we put things in place, but I believe that humanity, and I think it's also been demonstrated, by a lot of evolutionary biology studies, that humanity has to be good before they create community. And the fact that we have community, demonstrates that at least, and I know there's people who say like inherently humans are evil. I don't think so. I think inherently humans are good. I think that we have spikes of people that are evil because if evilness was the norm, like you and I wouldn't be talking here. We wouldn't, people wouldn't be working together on a common mission. It's just impossible to have community if you're not willing to put others in front of yourselves the majority of the time. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to be on average in the right direction.
Yeah. Just putting it out there, because I've seen what you're already doing. And again, I'm a big advocate and supporter of the Neurable mission and what you're doing. But right now, we're at a point where you can control Spotify, right? By simply putting your device on. And you can just, and through the technology, I can lower and increase the volume. I can play different songs. That's really exciting already. I think for a lot of people, that's witchcraft, right?
Yeah. And so would be a lighter if I brought it back, in the 80s, right? Like in 1800s, sorry, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I know you've talked already about in 5 years' time, but I think a lot of people want to hear about the Homo Deus kind of like superhuman kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that's like, oh fuck, we can do that now. Like, what is let's say, I want to actually give you a script.
Okay.
And instead of writing some dystopian Black Mirror shit, I want you to write a utopian world where the full possibilities of BCI, of Neurable have been reached. What are the possibilities there?
I think that the possibility is that I think that there's two directions, right? Direction number one, and slightly dystopian, is like that we finally have the ability to upload our brains and like we can live in this digital world, right? Which is also awesome, because you can create and do anything that you want in that world, right? I think that's, if you're talking about the most ultimate vision, it would be something like that, right?
Which is like whole brain emulation. Is that the
Exactly,
okay.
exactly. But I'm a really big believer that the biology matters too.
Yeah.
I think that the brain, because it's so adapted by the inputs that we get, for example, our visual system, our audible, our hearing system, etc. Like I still want to live in the real world, right? I don't mind connecting to the digital world from time to time and doing what I need to do. But I also want to participate in this beautiful world that's around us. And so to me, I think that the superpower is going to happen from the fact that the world is going to intuit your needs, right? And so, for example, if I want water right now, instead of me having to go get water, something would know it and it would be able to bring me water. It would be one of these things where the world would feel as if you had telekinetic powers, but it's not because it's, mystical, but it's because it's just your brain either doing things in the background that we can pick up and then seamlessly enabling that as part of your world, or you consciously saying like, oh, I want to pick that up, or I want to, interact in this way, or I want to create this image. Imagine creating a piece of painting about how you feel and making it as beautiful as what you have in your mind, for example, right? Like these are the kinds of superpowers that we can really enable. But it's one of these things that's like, it's that seamlessness that goes back to that hotel example, but it's like, how do you seamlessly allow people to do what they can imagine without the friction of learning the skill, right? Without the friction, it's basically the way that the world has been moving. Everything moves toward how do we lower the barrier to entry, and this is essentially lowering the barrier to entry for telekinesis, right? And like emotional sharing and creation. And that's really kind of like where, in the biggest picture, that's where I think the world is moving toward.
There's another episode in the recent season of Black Mirror where you can start to control through your app different mood states, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we all like being in different mood states, right? Apart from the more negative ones.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to feel euphoria. Sometimes we want to feel, I don't know, sexual, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's possible? The idea that, because at the moment you can tell people if they are feeling optimistic or if they're actually, you can explain like where are we right now, and when are we going to be a point where the device is not just telling us you're happy, you feel like shit, you need to go, but it's actually doing it seamlessly for you. And are we going to get to a point where everyone's just like, we're in just a utopian state because these BCIs are just basically making us feel fucking happy all the time? I usually don't swear as much in episodes, but
we can already do all that. That's the truth. But you don't need a BCI, right? That's what drugs are. Like drugs give you this dopamine hit and put you inside this state where you and you can always be happy, right? And what we've seen from drug addicts is that always being happy doesn't make you happy. You know what I'm saying? Like it makes you dependent, and then you hate that you are dependent to this, but you can't get off of it. It's like an addiction, right? And so I guess the main thing that I would get across is like, yes, right now we can tell high level pieces of emotion, let a person be able to understand that and even regulate it. Whether it's, oh, I feel tired, maybe I'll drink some coffee. I'm not able to focus. Maybe it's because I have ADHD. I should take some Adderall. Right? We already have the tools technically to do both changing somebody's mood, but then also monitoring it. Monitoring it just hasn't been possible at scale.
Yeah.
And so, and changing it has only been possible through a prescription. Or I guess through your, friend that knows a guy, right? Like those are the two ways of changing those mood states. Or I guess just coffee. You can just drink coffee. But I don't think we're necessarily changing what is possible. We're just enabling it to be done with a higher level of accuracy, with a higher level of empowerment, If you need to go into a meeting and you really need to be on, then drink that coffee. Press that button and make yourself energized. I think just like what we see right now with drugs, most people want to still live in their reality. But if you have deep depression, you want to be able to be guided out of it. Nobody wants to get TMS all the time, right? Nobody wants to take medication all the time. But if we can help people get through those moments or empower them to do that, that's at least where I see the positive side of it. Will there be addicts? Will there be people who fall down the wrong rabbit hole? Sure. I think that they will be. But I also think that there's a Ramses somewhere out there working on that problem, that had a tragic accident with somebody in their family that overdosed, and they're looking for a solution to prevent addiction. And there's already some drugs that can help with addiction. So I think that that ultimate future is possible. It's more here than you think. It's just that we've also demonstrated the responsibility that even with that future already being possible, we still haven't enabled that level of change where people don't want to be themselves.
Yeah, I know in Vedic traditions, Ayurvedic traditions, they talk about the state of joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the state of joy is pure contentness. You don't want really anything else. And so there's quite a few people that are looking at how founders, when they have big exits, how they often have this just deep sense of depression because they've been kind of pushing so hard to reach the top of the mountain. Then they're like, oh my God, where's my purpose? But often people that come from a certain Vedic tradition actually are just constantly in a state of joy. So it's like, and Jordan Schlane, who was on the podcast, he talks about the difference between contentness and happiness, and what actually gives you like real happiness, not like the cheap dopamine hits, but like, or as a drug user would do, like inject, but actually like a pure state of happiness. I think the reason why I'm talking about this is, and as we merge kind of chemistry and biology and physics together, are we going to get to a point where there is going to be a magic pill? And how can these different sides and these different people talk to one another? How the different Ramses talk to one another? Because often we're just in our own silos as well.
Yeah. Is there going to be a pill for happiness in the near future? Probably, but I don't think, but I think that, and once again, this could be just because I think the biology is so important too when it comes to the human being. I think that you can't have truly happiness without also understanding loss, right? And that's what I think we've seen with drug addicts, because technically we do have happiness. Like, if we give people dopamine consistently, they will be happy. You don't have a choice. But the brain adapts, right? It becomes it knows that this level of joy that's continuous is not healthy, and the receptors become more resistant to that type of response. So there is an equilibrium in ourselves that is true happiness, and that true happiness includes, I think, suffering of some kind. And I think that it includes hardships, and that it includes and going back to the founders, I agree a lot of them probably at exit feel like, where's my purpose? And I think that true happiness has to have a purpose. And having a purpose doesn't come from a pill. And so we might be able, so I don't know, that's I guess my perspective, and I don't know.
It's such an interesting thought, because I think when we start thinking about the ethics of what's to come with singularity, with AGI and all that, and really this huge tsunami that we're just not prepared for, which is many people are going to be losing their jobs. And I know I'm going slightly off script here, but how we redefine purpose is going to be, I think, the greatest question over the next decade. And it's probably gonna, if we don't answer it, I think we're gonna enter a pretty dark state.
Oh,
so
I agree.
It's something we need to answer pretty quickly, right?
I agree 100%. And that goes back to your previous comment, actually. Are we going to have a pill that creates happiness? We'll never create happiness until we understand purpose, right? At least in my personal opinion, right? could be wrong. You know, like I don't know what the future looks like. I wouldn't have thought about the iPhone, 200 years ago, right? So like I don't know, but like at least we have tried since the beginning of humankind to find happiness. And I think that the only people who truly find it are those that understand that happiness comes with purpose. Like that Japanese concept of ikigai, right? Do something that you love, something that you're good at, something that adds value to the world. And something that I can't remember the fourth one. Do you remember the fourth one by any
Something
chance?
you're good at? Did you say that one?
I said that one.
Okay, good at.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Gives you purpose or is meaningful to the world. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like they figured out happiness. Like, how we can put that in a pill, I have no idea, right?
So interesting.
That's why I think Japanese live forever. Like they live, centenarians. There's a lot of them there, right? The reason that they live forever, I think, or for a long time, not forever. They live for a long time is because ikigai.
Yeah.
Right. And we already know that happiness is a key part of longevity. Optimism is a key part of longevity.
It's true.
Right.
Eric Verdin told me that the two greatest factors that determine long life are purpose in life with work and family. And then the second one is the quality of your social community, of your connections as well.
Yeah.
Ramses, in terms of companies in the BCI space, apart from Neurable, are there any that you're particularly excited about that our listeners should maybe take a look at?
Yeah. What's the name of this company? He's from University of Houston, first name Jacob. I don't remember the name of the company. But they essentially have an implantable for depression where, they can use it essentially and create electrical stimulation to create a little bit more dopamine, get people out of that rut, right? Help people work out of depression. I think that kind of technology is really exciting. I think that the new work that's being done with deep brain stimulators, I mean, effectively his work is a deep brain stimulator, right? That I think is really great tech. I think that... Let's see. I'm a big fan of paradromics as well too. They I think have a really great solution toward how do you create a brain computer interface that is invasive that can work more longitudinally. Those are two of the companies that I'm most excited about.
So as we're recording this, Amanda Fielding passed away yesterday. She was a big voice in the psychedelic space, and she did this, let's call it surgery. I think she did it actually herself when she was younger. Wow. It's called tray panning, and what it does, you drill a hole in the skull to expose the dura mater, and it's basically meant to lead to a calming effect and also a greater state of consciousness, which is quite a kind of dramatic thing, right? But it's, as you're talking about these startups that are looking at kind of deep brain stimulation, right? What are they actually doing? And like, again, are they I'm just trying to think about like this is like super invasive, right? Drilling into a skull, or like, but like, what, like, how can we, I don't know where I'm going with this, apart from like giving someone like an electrical shock. Yeah. What sort of stimulation can you give someone to help them feel less depressed or put them on a path to the magic pill?
I mean, right now we're kind of at the stage of just giving them an electrical shock to a certain degree. Okay. Right? Like, think about chemotherapy. It's like a really barbaric way of killing cancer if you think about it. It's like, oh, these cells eat more energy than your normal ones do, so we're just going to kill everything and they're going to die faster. Wow. Right? Like that's essentially how chemotherapy works. Deep brain stimulation, it's going to get better. We're creating new like algorithms for doing stimulation that's a little bit more effective, more localized. But that's essentially like we're still at the chemotherapy days, where it's like we know that, for example, in the case of Parkinson's, the substantia nigra is deeply impacted by the dopamine in that area that creates movement issues for an individual. So let's put something in there that helps stimulate the cells in that area to create more dopamine, right? And it really is more of an electrical shock. I think in the future, if once we start really transfecting people with something like the work that Ed Boyden's lab is doing, with bioluminescence and like there might be more targeted ways of doing the type of work, but it is very rudimentary. And rudimentary doesn't mean bad. It's good enough. But just like we see chemotherapy moving toward proton therapy, where it's much more localized, specific, but they still use the original techniques. I think that we're going to start to see that more and more with neurotechnology at a faster pace, honestly.
Bioluminescent?
What's the best way of putting? I forgot the name. Photo. Do you remember the stuff that Ed Boyden does? I can't remember the name scientifically, but like he essentially shines light.
Okay.
And he got a Nobel Prize for it, and I would totally know the name if it wasn't for the fact that like I'm on camera right now and I have to remember it like instantly.
No, we're good.
But yeah, it's like he shines a light into the brain, and only the tissue that has been transfected gets activated.
Okay.
And so it's a very targeted approach for creating chemical changes in whatever tissue that you're dealing with.
Amazing.
Yeah. Optogenetics. That's what it is. Okay. Optogenetics. Yes.
We'll put that in the show notes. Ramses, what's next for Neurable? What can we expect over the next couple of years? Any cool announcements or releases that we should be aware of?
I mean, every month we release a new update to the app. I think some of the big ones that are coming up is integration with Spotify for music recommendation. We're going to be adding, control capabilities in the near future. And on top of that, we're integrating an AI agent as well that can really take some of that data and dynamically give you feedback. I think with the brain especially, there's just so many cool things you can pull out of it. And the problem that we've tried to do it manually, it's just there's too many, right? And it's too different from person to person. And so now that we have LLMs and we can add a little bit more logic on top of them from our neuroscientific perspective, we're trying to roll out something that can be a little bit more customized to the user's experience, right? But there's so many great things coming out, new form factors, new partnerships. Just like Bluetooth and noise cancellation is in every device, you're going to start to see neurotech in every device that touches your head. AR glasses, there's just going to be so much cool tech and you're going to take it for granted. Like, that's the world I can't wait for. When you take neurotech for granted, just like, do you ever think like, oh man, I'm so glad I have Bluetooth in these headphones? You don't. You just put them on and then you listen to your music, and they automatically paired with your phone. If anything, you're like, why is Bluetooth pairing so poorly? Like, that's what you think about when you think about Bluetooth sometimes, right? But like, how do we make BCIs so part of the world that you take it for granted? That's what I'm really looking forward to. And that's kind of like the pathway that we see for what we're building in Neurable. How do we create that world?
Just one comment on security.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you're mentioning that, I'm just thinking of the abundance of data and how open people are to you sharing that data, maybe with third parties. And
Yeah, at least for us, like I said, we have a neuroethicist as my co-founder. We've done, we're already compliant on HIPAA and all these other kind of, GDPR. We're essentially not like officially, but like we take the same type of approach as what you would see from GDPR. It is our customers' data. We actually don't make money off of the data. So our customers consent to sharing it with us in order to be part of our shared mission. Like, do we want to tackle some of these big disease states in the future? Do we want to create new capabilities that can create that seamless future? So our customers are a part of that journey. But if they want their data deleted, they can. And then on top of that, any data that we collect, we separate the ID or the individual, the way to identify the individual, with the actual data itself. And we do that even though it makes it harder for us to do some of the science, but because, that is the ethical way of handling it.
Final question. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could right now? Ramses at 8 years old, 9 years old, after seeing your uncle go through what he did.
I guess the biggest piece of advice is that you're doing the right thing. Don't give up. Because so many times I have almost thought about giving up, right? It's been a really hard journey, from even when I was in just college, right? Like, I was having trouble with some of my classes, The way that the University of Washington works is that you apply to the college and then you have to apply to your major. and getting into computer science is really, really hard. And I got denied like 3 times, right? And a part of me actually just wanted to leave college, right? There's so many times where I look back where my story could be different. Even before me, I look at the sacrifices my parents made for me to even be here right now. And I think the people who have helped me the most in life are the ones who tell me that, that they believe in me, and that this is going to happen, because less so now. Now I feel like the majority of people really see the vision happening, but for many years, it has been more people telling me that this doesn't make any sense. What you're doing is impossible, or, like, especially when I was in grad school, and I'm sure every naive student in grad school goes in there thinking that they're going to cure cancer or change the world, or in my case, I wanted to make EEG scalable, right? And like, throughout many times in my life, I've been very fortunate to have the person that says to me, "You're doing the right thing, like, keep at it, I believe in you." And I don't think people hear that enough, especially like entrepreneurs, especially people trying to do big things. I think that the world is ran by the common sense response is what a pessimist would say, right? A pessimist is right 90% of the time, and that's why we don't have self-driving cars yet at scale, right? People said that was going to happen many, many years ago. We're still not there. We're getting there. Like, we're seeing Waymo's launch in multiple, cities at this point. But it took somebody many, many years of not believing, believing that it was going to be sooner than it was, right? And not believing that what other people were saying to get there. And I just think that the whole world needs to hear that more often. And if we did that, I think that we would have even more rapid progress across all of humanity.
I really resonate with that. Ramses, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, mate.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Hey. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, man. That was fun.
That was really fun. If you want to know what tomorrow has in store like I do, you definitely want to listen to our recent episode where I talked to Peter Diamandis about a future where we could live forever. Thank you so much.